Cloisters is a song that Swami Kriyananda often talked about in lectures, more perhaps than any others, because he used it to illustrate the principle of holding on to the inspiration, the initial inspiration for a song throughout the song, rather than letting the music run away with other feelings and especially excited emotions. In writing Cloisters as a part of the Mediterranean Magic Suite and a slideshow that he did with it, he sought to express the feeling of the declining monasteries in Italy. In fact, there was one that he visited, a monastery that had been turned into just a church and a tourist attraction then. And so he wanted to express that there wasn't just this old monastic feeling, but there was something different, something that had changed and something a little more modern with it. And so in that, he starts the song with this very, what's called a Gregorian mode that you hear in medieval chanting, where it goes, "Long I've called you, my Lord, long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight." So it's very much in the Gregorian mode there, but then he blends it with something a little more modern in the next two lines. So instead of singing, "Bathe the darkness with tears of devotion," it's instead, "Bathe the darkness with tears," that high note breaks it out, "tears of devotion, offered candles in prayer to your light." So that's the adding a little more modern. And then he says very clearly that where he held on to the inspiration of this monastic tradition being a little bit more modern was on the next line, "How much longer, friend, must I cry your name?" So he wanted to hold the power and the tradition of that monastic heritage, rather than dissipating it into emotionalism, which he would often sing, "How much longer, friend?" And he'd exaggerate it that way to show what a lot of modern composers would do with a similar thing in having this big emotional outburst at that point. And then it's for this reason that last line, "I am yours, ever yours, will you come?" Kriyananda talked very clearly that instead of coming back to the tonic, which would be, "I am yours, ever yours, will you come?" which is the root note or the starting note of the song, he keeps it up on a high note. It doesn't end on the tonic, it ends with the higher note, as if to let that feeling and that sentiment offer itself up into infinity. And using that, the song really connects us to those hallowed monastic traditions, which had a lot of power in their seeking of God, but blending it with a little bit of modern energy of Dwapara Yuga that says we need to be more energy aware and break out of that tradition, as I'll talk about a little bit more later. Now, as part of this suite of songs, Mediterranean Magic, I mentioned this with When You Come From Napoli a number of sessions ago, that whole slideshow and the whole suite of songs is really a healing journey for the heart and different heart-related issues. So you have songs like Have You Seen Sorrento that works for unkind thoughts, Sorrento Flowers for hopelessness, Sail With Me to Capri for loathing, and we did When We Come From Napoli, which for things like dullness and mental dullness and apathy, among other non-enthusiastic qualities. But Cloisters, for its part, comes toward the end of this suite, by which time we've really healed a lot of these issues and these difficulties of the heart, and have found a portable paradise within ourselves. And its message is then that the old forms of monasteries, where we needed to shelter ourselves from the world in order to feel and have a spiritual life, those aren't really needed in the same way that they were in the past, because through practices like yoga and meditation, we find that everything we ever sought through that seclusion can be found already inside ourselves. And in that same way, Cloisters addresses this quality of dependence on others, which is what Kriyananda assigned to this song in day 15 of Secrets of Emotional Healing. He says, "The secret of overcoming dependence on others is to reflect. Can a person gain anything from anyone that doesn't resonate with something he already possesses in himself? Live more from within, and from that center radiate your own special strength and courage to all. Cloisters also addresses one of the challenges that that can be encountered especially in the old monastic model, which is a kind of spiritual dryness that comes from when the devotion of the heart that maybe inspired you to join the monastery and to take up the monastic life ends up getting too bound by rules and formalities and the similar emotion of a narrow sense of propriety, of saying that only things that are in this little box, if we're exactly this rule and we say exactly the right things and pray in exactly the same way, that's the only respectable or proper way of doing things. It reminds me of a time when I was watching my grandmother, who's a Missouri Synod Lutheran, arguing a little bit with a person from another Lutheran church that was very similar but a little bit different, and they were arguing over the properness of whether you had wine or grape juice for the communion ceremony. And it's like, okay, that's a little bit narrow sense of propriety there. But in any way, coming back to Cloisters then, so we have at the beginning of this song in the Gregorian mode a fairly clear resonance with the energy of the throat chakra, which elevates one's consciousness above the passions of the lower chakras and above the typically outward directed energies of the heart. And that is a true yearning for God that draws itself away from expecting fulfillments outside of oneself, which is to say outside of God, including fulfillments in things like relationships, and thinking that the monastic structure is going to give us that fulfillment that we seek. But at the same time, we can hear in that song, and I think that recording from Mediterranean Magic does it very well, that we feel there's a little feeling of distance or thinness, even a cold feeling, kind of like the stone of the old monasteries themselves. And it's like there's a spiritual life that's uplifted by the intent of wanting to live spiritually, but yet limited by the lack of heart, the lack of energy from the heart, that warmness and that real strength coming to support that throat chakra. It's like we have in Ananda's Festival of Light, where it talks about the lower altar of good works, as opposed to the noble taper of inner communion with the Lord, so that the good works, the following the rules, doing that kind of spiritual life maybe lacks that depth of inner power. It's as Yogananda said, too many rules destroys the spirit and keeps God at a distance, rather than allowing oneself to really surrender completely into God's love. So Cloisters then, in what it's doing, it acknowledges that Gregorian mode, that old monastic model, but then breaks out of it to break out of those rules, and then also introduces a harmony. As well as when we often sing it, we're having a harmony that intermix men and women together, which of course you don't ever do in a traditional monastery. The genders are separated. What this harmony really accomplishes is it adds that energy of the heart, not to pull the throat downward, but again to support from the heart the energy in the throat chakra that's trying to rise and even further upwards. What it's doing is keeping that spiritual dryness that can come from too many rules from starting to sink downwards, because if you just follow rules, if that's the whole structure of your spiritual life, then eventually that dryness can sink down into frustration and bitterness, and especially doubt, which is one of the negative qualities of the throat chakra, the doubt that says whether you're really doing the right thing. And what we need to feed that with is the flaming certainty of the heart's devotion that really, sets that devotion afire. Those lines, bathe the darkness with tears of devotion, offered candles and prayer to your light. It suggests a lot of actions of that limited or even the mercenary devotion, as Yogananda called it. The tears of uncertainty, the small flames of candles, rather than that burning fire that consumes the whole forest of your desires and one's ego. It's like that other chant by Swami Kriyananda, Quanto ti amaro, that I don't remember all the Italian words right off, but the one of the last lines there is something about like a fire that burns up the forest, I burn up my ego in my devotion to thee. That's the kind of the strength that we want, that this song can help inspire. So when the harmony joins in, there's not only the strong feeling in the heart is typical with harmony, but again, that clear feeding of energy into the throat chakra, which I think is rare for a harmony to achieve that energization of the throat chakra. The effect of which is then to strengthen the relationship with God, pulling here up to the spiritual eye, rather than just strengthening, again, outward relationships or relationships to the monastic rule, or also to avoid the pride of saying, look how much prayer and meditation I've done, look how many candles I've offered, look how many tears I've cried. That's the trap of the ego at the medulla that can take pride in how much spiritual work you've done. But what we do is we offer that, we avoid that by offering into God, saying, I am yours, ever yours. That's the statement of self-offering, allowing that energy to flow past the medulla to the spiritual eye. And it's really like that harmony is more like a divine friend that's responding to your earlier devotion in the heart and the throat chakras, and now pulling you up to that place of divine certainty. And so I think that those calls at the end of the song, how much longer, friend, must I cry your name? And the question, will you come? At this point here at the spiritual eye are not so much questions or doubts. It's really that we've come to the realization that what we've maybe been missing all these years and sort of trying to live the rigid monastic life is expecting a certain kind of response from God rather than being open to any response. You realize that the divine presence has been there all along as the friend through all those years of calling, but that friend is ever near. It's like Sri Yukteswar says in Autobiography of a Yogi, where he describes God as giving adequate responses to the devotee's needs and the devotee's prayers. So it's like when you're, let's say you're, needing to find your car keys, and you offer a little prayer to the car keys, and not to the car keys, you offer a little prayer to God to say, help me find my keys because I need to go to an appointment. And then, you have just a slight intuition that says, maybe I left them here. That's an adequate response from God to that prayer. It doesn't mean that the masters need to appear and say, thou shalt look in this particular place. It's just that little hint of intuition is the adequate response, rather than this grand kind of thing that we might think we should expect. And so, we need to not expect so much of how God will respond, but just see God's response in just about everything. And in this way, we can say that warmth that the song brings, and the looseness and the friendship of the divine presence addresses qualities like loneliness, because we feel that presence is there. And also, I think the question of rigidity, and that quality of rigidity, because you need to be more flexible and adaptable in allowing that divine response to come whenever and however it might. Kriyananda's recording on An Evening in Italy, which we'll hear next, really helps us relax into that knowing and to release the doubt that comes from all the striving and reaching for something that's already at the center of our own being. That's where a lot of that doubt can come from, is that we're striving and we're reaching, we're trying to grasp at God, thinking God is somewhere out there, not realizing all those years maybe that God is already and has always been right here, right side within us, and we need only to allow ourselves to realize it and open ourselves to it, and then to feel it. As we listen to this second recording again from An Evening in Italy, listen for the background strings that really contribute more even of a sense of that warmth, which is a way to feel God's presence throughout the body. And the song is sung through twice, and I think the second time through, after the energy's been brought here, you really feel that warmth and that divine energy emanating from the spiritual eye throughout the entire body, again, driving away that loneliness, driving away that expectations of things outside yourself. And then there's even a third time through, because he sings it both in English and Italian, that third time through we're even more relaxed into that divine certainty. And right at the end you hear these beautiful deep bells coming in, that's like giving us a sense of celebration as we've relaxed away from expectations, we've relaxed away from the ego, and we merge ourselves into that divine presence. So let's enjoy that now.
Dal mio cuore ti chiamo, Signore, quanti anni che piango per te, quanti anni che sogno vederti, o Signor, oggi vieni a me. Non lasciarmi più così solo qui, sono sempre tu, verrai tu. Long I've called you, my Lord, long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight. Bathe the darkness with tears of devotion, offered candles in prayer to your light. How much longer, friend, must I cry your name? I am yours, ever yours. Will you come? Dal mio cuore ti chiamo, Signore. Quanti anni che piango per te, quanti anni che sogno vederti, o Signor, oggi vieni a me, non lasciarmi più così solo qui, sono sempre tu, verrai